Hello everyone. I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the movie. This is going to be in a podcast format. It's going to be around 13 minutes long. That's a little shorter than normal, but due to my restrictions of the English project, I have to talk about it in under 15 minutes. So we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in the movie, and like the overall thoughts of my opinions on the movie. We're going to be talking about how different characters, how they got inspired from the comics, and how the movie adapted them into a certain style that evoked their own image and differentiated them through like different universes and stuff like that. I'll also be talking about the history of some of the Spider-Man characters, and with that being said, let's move on to our main topics. Let's talk about the history of Miles Morales' Spider-Man character. He was introduced in the Ultimate Comics after Spider-Man died in his run. Let's talk about the Ultimate. So the Ultimate Universe in the comics is like a separate universe from the main comic universe, used to gain more audiences and comic fans because a lot of comic people didn't want to read all the previous material to understand what was going on. So they created a whole new universe with a whole different set of comics for people to understand that. And so after Peter Parker died in his Ultimate Spider-Man run, they introduced a new character, Spider-Man Miles Morales. It was very controversial at the time because, Peter Parker was the only Spider-Man before him. So it was very different, and a lot of people were irritated because he didn't really have any differences between Peter Parker. He had a lot of the same character motivations and style. It's like, they didn't really care because, what differentiated him from Peter Parker? Well, with this movie that came out, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, it changed his character a lot. He has a motivation, his parents are alive. He doesn't have he has an uncle figure who actually is a villain. So it's an interesting twist, the Prowler. He has to defeat the Prowler, and then he gets introduced to all these other characters. Romances with Gwen Stacy, kind of like Peter Parker, but it's just they made the character different, likable, and it didn't seem political in any way. And so a lot of people all of a sudden started loving Miles Morales, and he got really popular through on that. So overall, that was basically Miles Morales' history in comics, and this is how it affected the movies, and how the movie actually made Miles Morales a popular character towards the main audience around the world. When going over the multiverse for Across the Spider-Verse, it's very different from the comics. We have, of course, there's different universes. They explain it with the web, this the whatever you called it, this Spider-Verse, right? And so it's shown as a web, creating different timelines, kind of like the Branch and Loki from Marvel TV show Loki. But in the comics, it does have that same thing, but there's these interesting characters that are introduced. They're these vampire-like beings that go after spider totems, and spider totems are kind of the soul of Spider-Man. So all these villains are trying to kill certain Spider-Man characters. While in Across the Spider-Verse, they introduced this character called the Spot. And the Spot creates all these events that can destroy universes because he's not supposed to be here at all in the multiverse. And so he's an interesting new villain. He's very unknown, but they still made him really cool and interesting to the plot. And so with the Spider-Man multiverse, it's Miguel O'Hara was not as important in the Spider-Man multiverse comics, but they made him a main player in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is very interesting. And they made him a villain or antagonist to Miles Morales, even though a lot of people see him as making the right decision when fighting Miles Morales. When it comes to talking about different Spider-Man characters, it's not just Peter Parker anymore. We got Hobie Brown. He's actually related to Miles Morales, with the family tree, but he's in a different universe, and his name is Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk has the powers of a guitar and sound-based powers. while also having the normal Spider-Man powers Peter Parker has. His like whole universe and his whole character is like on a play of British politics, talking about anarchy and talking about different things that happened in like the 1970s and 80s, and talking about punk rock and just like has some political images, which is really interesting. When it comes to Gwen Stacy is normally the lover of Peter Parker who dies from the Green Goblin. But in this universe, Gwen Stacy's classmate Peter Parker turns into the Lizard, and she has to stop him. And then that like has her whole character motivation of becoming Spider-Gwen and Spider-Gwen. This whole universe in this movie, they made it like pastel colors, and so every time a different emotion she had, it was represented with different colors, and so that was like evoking a different image compared to all the other universes in this movie. Talk about Spider-Man in 2099, also known as Miguel O'Hara. It's really interesting because he has a giant line of comics, and it's all about the future. It's like supposed to happen in the future. Like Peter Parker was around 100 years ago, but Spider-Man 2099 wasn't. And so Spider-Man 2099, his powers, he doesn't really get his powers from the spider. He has to inject his powers with this like syringe or like kind of like steroids, but not really. It's just like a drug he administers to himself, and he has like claw-like Wolverine powers. He's got, he's a little bit of a vampire, which is interesting, because he has like fangs, and like there's a lot of technology. So like it's interesting because there's a lot of characters that also have their own 2099 comics, like Punisher and Hulk, and so it's really interesting. Next, we can move on to Spider-Man Noir. He's actually getting a live-action TV show in 2026. This is really interesting because his whole universe is in black and white, representing a noir type of genre in movies. It's all about detective work, and his name is Ben Reilly, and so Ben Reilly is actually Uncle Ben. And so, interestingly, in all these universes, Peter Parker is very influential, but there's different characters who are also Spider-Man. So like Miles Morales, Tobey Brown, Miguel O'Hara. There's like Gwen, different other characters that could be Spider-Man that were in Peter Parker's lives. The whole Morales family has this whole line. So it's just really interesting that it's not just Peter Parker, it's other characters that are also involved. Let's talk about the use of cameos in this movie across the Spider-Verse. They first of all use live action characters, which is just a feat of in itself because you got to combine live action and animation. And usually Roger Rabbit had animation in live action. This is live action in animation, so it's really interesting. And then, of course, they added the nostalgic Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and they even introduced Donald Glover as a Prowler. And he was actually the inspiration of Miles Morales as a character, because in one of those reality TV shows, I forgot, it might have been Parks and Rec, one of the TV shows, he was wearing a Spider-Man costume, and that's what convinced the comic person who created Miles Morales to create the character. So it's just really interesting. I might need to fact check that, but I'll edit that out if it's wrong. But I'm pretty sure that was right. Or that's how they decided to put him in as Prowler. They also have the clone of Spider-Man, which is Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly is named after Uncle Ben, but he's actually the clone of Spider-Man, so that was interesting. He had like a 90s costume aesthetic. Then there was Penny Parker. She was in the previous movie, but she's obviously changed a lot. She's matured because in the comics, her friends kind of die because of Venom, and so she's like completely changed. We got Lego Spider-Man. A little kid animated that whole 2-minute sequence of Lego Spider-Man, which is really cool. They just got like a little kid to work on it while creating the movie. What else? We got a lot of the animated TV show characters, like the 90s one, Ultimate Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man, which were all, like dedicated towards the audience of like little kids around who are around probably 16 or 17 by the time watching it. They're like, oh, that's that TV show I was watching when I was a kid, and I saw that. And so it's just really interesting. and just really, it was really cool for people to see that on the TV screen. Then there's Web Slinger, which is a cowboy Spider-Man. He's got like a spider horse, and just all these different characters. They got Spider T-Rex. So with all these different cameos in the movie, it just showed that like literally Spider-Man is limitless. Like anything can happen with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is such a moldable character in this Marvel universe. Let's talk about the missed potentials in this movie. This movie is really a perfect movie, but I also really would like to change a lot of things about it to make it my own perfection, right? Because in a lot of movies, they don't really develop the villains enough, and Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is just, they don't have enough character development. I feel like the best ones had to been the Green Goblin and Michael Keaton's Vulture, but Green Goblin literally dies at the end of the first movie for Tobey Maguire, or like in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, we don't really get to see a lot of Spider-Man's villains. They're kind of just like shown a little bit throughout, and it's more about the different Spider-Man characters in the universe, which I understand that they gotta like have all this information they gotta put in the movie at once, and they only have a limited amount of time to do it, which is kind of part of their constraints, you could say. But it was just kind of annoying because I love a lot of Spider-Man villains, and Spider-Man villains is actually what helps me like the comics a lot, because a lot of the Spider-Man villains I feel like are really cool, and each one's very different from another. And then another thing they had missed potential on was introducing two different characters that I really wanted them to introduce. One is Silk. She's a character that got the same spider that bit Peter Parker, and she was at the same field trip at the same time. So like, she's a really cool character in the comics. And then that introduces, I also want them to introduce those vampire villains from the comics. I know they can't directly adapt it anymore, but it would have been cool if they just leaned somewhat similar to the comics, but also do like that the Spot was made an unknown villain to a really cool villain and very like multiversal. But I just wish they added some different factors to the movie that I feel like it could have contributed to more of a success in the movie, even though the movie's already perfect. But there's a lot of stuff I would want to add, and that's fine. One important factor is the audience when you're trying to get the movie to be appealing. And the main audience in this movie was kids and family. And so they made sure that Miles Morales' dynamic with his father and mom were very important, because having a good relationship with your parents is really good. And they wanted to, display a positive message to the audience. Another thing that Stan Lee always talked about before he passed away was when he created Spider-Man, he put a mask over Spider-Man for a reason, because he wanted to make sure the kids knew that anyone could be Spider-Man if they dreamed to be. Even though you had to have the powers to be Spider-Man, basically he wanted to make sure that like anyone could like dress as him anywhere, And so that's what really made him so popular, is that because it was so accessible to everyone. Peter Parker is relatable when it comes to romances, like all of his romances like never work out, and never, it's like literally in Tobey Maguire movies, she like is always breaking up with him, or Gwen Stacy dies in Andrew Garfield's movie. Like, a lot of tragic things happen in romance with a lot of people, and so Spider-Man makes mistakes. He doesn't save people, so that's another part of the reason why he's so relatable, is he makes so many mistakes. Like, Spider-Man lets all these people die, and he feels like he has this responsibility that he has to have, and it's just, it weighs over him. There's a lot of times where he like kind of crosses the line, and he knows he can't really cross it, so he makes sure he's like saves everyone, and he doesn't let the bad guys die, and so it's kind of like heroism at its finest, and being a superhero. And so a lot of people relate to that energy and the positive energy Spider-Man has. And it's influenced a lot of people's lives. With that being said, this is the end of the podcast. I try to talk about a lot of stuff during this, a lot of topics. So if I couldn't cover what you want to go over, I'm sorry. There you go.